We have to learn, unlearn, and relearn. Whatever it is that got us to where we are is not going to get us to where we want to go in the future. So we like to talk about learn, unlearn, and relearn, because the old ways of doing things, we need some method, some strategy, some system, some process, some way to unlearn all the connections that we have made, all the skills that we've developed that are no longer relevant in the future. And I think it's a good way to talk about it as a digital skill versus an analog skill. An analog skill might work in the past, but what we need are digital skills. And the rules of digital are completely different. So the wiring in our brains has to be rewired. So we've already learned a whole lot of things that used to work for us, but they don't work for us in the future. And how do you know which ones to let go of and which ones to keep, which ones to embrace? You have to have some model of the future that you can look at and say, the future looks like this. And here's a model of myself, my skills, my capabilities, my knowledge. And then I need to learn a whole bunch of new things while letting go of the past. This is not an easy thing. And I think this is why a lot of leadership development programs fail, because they're just piling new information on top of old information on top of old information, and they're not doing much unlearning. They're not helping people to take ownership of their own development, which is personal leadership, because personal leadership is about you leading you rather than somebody telling you what to do. That's where the cookie cutter learning doesn't work anymore, where somebody tells you what you need to know. I can't tell you what you need to know and what you need to do. Only you can do that, because you have an intimate understanding of yourself. What I can tell you is give you examples of what is working now for other people, and then what isn't working, and then you can look and say, maybe you're doing some of the things that aren't working, and you could be embracing some of these things that are working. So this is part of the unlearning process that we do at Gold Zone with the people that we work with. The next part of the context about learn, unlearn, and relearn is take a look at this. My goodness, I'll take myself off again so you can see it. Look at this. We got 5 generations working side by side. It wasn't always like this. We might have had 3 generations, but definitely not 5. Today we have 5 generations working together. And if you look at the traditionalists on the left and the Generation Z on the right, the largest sector of the workforce is currently the millennials. The millennials have taken over as the highest number in the workforce. So the millennials are the ones who are guiding a lot of the future policy. A lot of this focus on the environment, sustainability, health, and equality, equal rights, and this sort of focus has come from the millennial generation. And if you look at down the bottom where it says, I could put myself there, on the left you got dominance. That's the traditionalists are into the dominance. And on the right, we have, see if I can get my hand working here. Let me move myself. Here, influence, versus here, dominance. So our traditionalists are more into dominance, formal hierarchies, and more masculine ways of doing things. That's more over here. And this is a continuum. So you look, Generation X is in the middle. And then we have more over here, the millennials, and Generation Z are more into influence. They're more informal, dress informal, speak informally, communicate informally, text informally through acronyms. You got hierarchy versus network, and then you got masculine versus feminine. So a lot more of the values and the way of doing things that's coming in the future is more feminine. And you'll see that, and it's not, masculine good, feminine bad. That's ridiculous. What we've had in the past, the old way of doing things is very masculine dominated. And from the feminine point of view, we're not necessarily talking about woman, but obviously woman, feminine goes together. But what we want is a balance between masculine and feminine. That's when we have the most flow. That's where yin and yang comes in, yin and yang. You have more flow when the two are in balance, in harmony. So the old way of doing things, command and control, it doesn't work anymore in the new environment. And how many of you, I'll ask you, how many of you like being told what to do? You like being told what to do? No, I bet you don't. Most people don't like being told what to do, and particularly this millennial and Generation Z don't like being told what to do. Whereas the older traditionalists and the boomers are used to giving authority to people who tell them what to do. And so a lot of these people will bring up their children, it's very much do what I say, not what I do. Whereas it takes a different style, it takes a different way of leading, a different way of parenting to parent people today. Like our children, 3 years old, 5 years old, and 7 years old, all of them have iPhones and they do Roblox, whatever, I can't get the name right. They do Minecraft, they build houses and rooms and stuff, and then they cooperate, spontaneously collaborate with each other, helping each other. They have a lot of skills that come out naturally when you're not bossing them and telling them what to do. It's a completely different way of a structured learning and telling them in the past, this is what you can and can't do all the time. Now, we're not talking about giving them total free rein and letting them loose entirely. There is some structure there, but it is very different. Yes, there's a lot of misunderstanding between the generations because of the different styles and how we have to communicate differently to younger people. And there's a common complaint of many of the older generation, young people these days, they're, irresponsible, they're, like this, it wasn't like this in my day. And their parents and grandparents said the same thing to them. So as the generations change, all the older people say, the same thing about the younger people. It's true, isn't it? So they also say that the millennial generation is inheriting the largest wealth transfer in history, is going from the older generations to the millennial generation. So many of them are going to be the wealthiest, than their previous generations have been. So they're going to inherit all that wealth. And this is changing the nature of work. It's changing businesses. It's changing companies. And I mean, we can't have the company telling the consumers what they should do and what product should be acceptable and this sort of thing. The consumers are telling the companies, the suppliers, what kind of values they want, and they just will vote with their dollars. They will go and buy from somebody whose values lines up with theirs. That's a fundamental shift. The power shifted from the producer to the consumer. And those of us who are consumers, we vote with our wallets. We vote with our feet. This is very, very different reality than what we're used to. Completely different. Digital natives, Gen Z, we're hardwired in the internet. Whereas the traditionalists and many boomers and even many Generation X, I'm in the Generation X. I'm at the beginning of Generation X. And Victoria's at the end of Generation X. And my parents were not boomers. My parents were traditionalists. And then our children are whatever comes after Generation Z, maybe it's Generation A. So my parents were in the traditional category and the children are off this chart in the young category. So we cover this as a wide spectrum. And I think this is very relevant to leadership because the way that my father brought up me is very different than the way that I'm bringing up my children. Very, very different. Who can relate to that? Anyone can relate to that? The way that you were brought up, very different from the way you're bringing up your children. And if you want to know about what qualities a person has as a leader, you look at how they lead their children, because it's not how you deal with people who are on the same level as you. It's how you deal with people who are way more powerless than you. It's how you deal with the everyday, ordinary people that determines what type of leader you are. That happens for a lot of people too, doesn't it? Where they will kowtow to somebody who has a perceived higher position and can't hold their ground. And, how do you communicate with somebody who has more power than you? This is what we call the power continuum. And what you have is the old style on the left and the new paradigm, new style on the right. I'll put myself in the middle so I'm hardly covering anything. There you go. So what we have here is that the traditionalists on the left of those 5 generations is more used to the older style of leadership on this continuum. And what works with the younger generations is more on the right side, which is dealing with personal power. So we have more position power on the traditional category, and then we have more personal power. How we deal with people in a more superior or perceived to have more power than us is through personal power. And if you look at that McKinsey data and research and what you need to develop to succeed in the future of work, you could summarize all of that by saying you need to develop your personal power. It resides in you versus being given to you. And you use expert knowledge, because a lot of all these digital skills, communication skills, personal skills, cognitive skills is all dealing with your own expert knowledge, your understanding, and versus having authority given to you where you don't necessarily have those skills yourself. And, in the position power, you got autocratic, and in the personal power, you got more democratic. You can empower people to be involved and to make a decision versus telling them what to do. You help them come to the conclusion themselves. What you're guided by is the vision, the values, versus having this vision statement that was created by the board and it hangs in the boardroom wall and nobody knows what it means. Nobody knows how to apply it. Whereas with personal power, if you empower everybody in the organization to step up to the leadership challenge to embrace personal power, then you're encouraging every person to be a leader. You're encouraging every person to be speaking up, to know what their role is and how it adds to the organization and contributes to the vision. So, do you understand fully the vision of where you work? Does everyone who works with you understand how the vision impacts them and what they do on a day-by-day basis that contributes to the vision? In my experience, many people don't even know what a vision is. We all know what a vision, what the term vision means, something we see, vision, we see with vision, or something that is a picture of what it looks like in the end in the future, but many of us have a lot of difficulty describing what the vision is. And I think this is one of the skills that needs to bridge in the future. All of us need to be visionary. And obviously that's the top level of leader is visionary. So we're going to get into that.